mental illness, and sometimes fatal accidents involving police officers and their families. Secondly, I believe that these incidents are caused by the low morale and also the low remuneration and poor working conditions of police officers vis-a-vis the risks that they undertake in the service of the nation. And to finalize on that, I'll combine it with one of the questions that was raised by the Honorable Leader of Majority, which is to say, I intend to vigorously fight for the welfare and improved terms of service for police officers as well as prison officers because of the critical nature of the role they play in securing our country. I know the current administration has committed in its manifesto to review the terms and other welfare issues, including housing and mortgages. I will be the #1 champion to have that part of the manifesto implemented fully so that you can instill better morale, better working conditions, and a happier Kenya Police Service, a happier Kenya Prison Service. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Leader of Majority asked me whether I would be proud and arrogant. The answer is no. I believe that the ultimate trait of leadership is humility. And most people tend to confuse humility with cowardice. The two are not related. We'll be humble. We'll submit ourselves to all authorities, starting with the appointing authority, His Excellency the President, my colleagues, but also arms of government, including this House. And I say this with a bit of pride because I've been a member of one of the Houses of Parliament for 10 years. I do appreciate and recognize the critical role that Parliament plays in oversighting the executive and also pushing for accountability within government. I will remain a servant not only of this country, but also of the institutions that have been set up under our Constitution and our law so that I can effectively discharge my mandate as Cabinet Secretary for the Interior and National Administration. I'll obey summons and invites and comply with all directions of Parliament and relate well with my now former colleagues because it is a symbiotic relationship, and the services we offer from the executive, from the legislature, from the judiciary are services to make our country better, and they are symbiotic and related. I will not be proud. I'll be humble, but extremely firm because this docket is extremely sensitive and all the other sectors of the nation rely on a safe country. So humility should not be mistaken for cowardice. I'll be extremely firm and ruthless with the wrong people because 99% of our people are law-abiding. The 1% that are lawbreakers will be extremely ruthless with them, and we will speak very little about or with them, and will act decisively, ruthlessly to ensure our nation is secure. Honorable Speaker, Chairman, the third question on Chapter 6 raised, I think also the Majority Leader had asked about salaries. I have answered that question on the welfare. The Leader of Minority, the Honorable Pio Wandai, asked about Chapter 6 vis-a-vis its place in the Constitution. It is true that Chapter 6 behoves on state and public officers to exercise the highest levels of integrity and to refrain from any conduct that may put the office which they serve in public odium or ridicule. It is also true that our constitution in other parts, the same constitution in other chapters, requires that persons who are accused of committing crimes must be taken through due process before any punishment or action is taken against them. Therefore, it is my view that there is no contradiction between the values, the very high moral standards that are anticipated under Chapter 6, and the very particular requirements of due process and fair trial, which are provided in other parts of the Constitution. This is my take. That Chapter 6 was intentionally left that way, so that on the one hand, we have a moral imperative where public officers can exercise their conscience, and even when the law does not demand, they can even leave office or step aside or even retire or resign from office based on their conscience. And I think it's not an idle chapter, because I think in this country increasingly it will be very difficult for people who do not meet the moral and ethical standards that are set in our Constitution to operate. So that chapter is there. But on the other hand, there are the bedrock principles of criminal justice and human rights that require that if you accuse someone of committing a crime, it is important that due process first is carried out, because the danger of people using the instruments of state to accuse others falsely is extremely, extremely likely. And people can abuse the criminal justice system just to accuse other people, get them out of the way, and then achieve what they wanted. So that balance must continue to exist in our view, in our Constitution. It is not contradictory, it is complementary. On the question of my law firm, I would like to respond as follows. With regard to the PSC report, which has been referred to by the Honorable Pio and I have practiced law for 22 years. I have never been involved in any professional misconduct whatsoever. With regard to the report which he is talking about, reference was made to a payment which was made to my law firm of 500,000 shillings. That payment was not made by any company, leave alone a company that supplied NYS. It was made by a friend of mine and a colleague called Onesimus Kipchumba Murkomen. And this is the story. Onesimus Kipchumba Murkomen owed me 500,000 shillings, which I had lent him. And I went and asked him to pay me back. And he wrote me a check. That's it. Period. As to the 15 million shillings of the Honorable Pio Wandai is saying, I am not aware. I think he's confusing my law firm with another law firm. I'm very clear. I am extremely clear. And I would like him to clarify, Mr. Speaker, because this is a public process. I don't want to live here with Kenyans imagining that I obtained 15 million shillings from the proceeds of crime. 500,000 shillings, was I paid? Yes. By out of the box? No. By Onesimus Kipchumba Murkomen, who owed me a friendly loan of 500,000 shillings, because at that time we were borrowing money from each other, which happens among colleagues. I'm sure even these MPs, they owe each other some money. So that is the short story around that issue, Mr. Chairman. On the final issue on the running mate, the question raised by the member for Matungulu, Kadhiani, or Matungulu this side, Kadhiani this side. Now, first, it is not true that I fought so hard to be a running mate. That is not true. What is true, Mr. Chairman, is that I was fortunate to be on the short list of 6 members of my party who are being considered to be running mates for President William Ruto. In that short list, it is also true that I ended up being a runners-up. It is also true that in that process, the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua, who is now Deputy President of Kenya, was nominated to be a running mate, and I was the runners-up. That bit is true. With regard to the question whether I've recovered from the shock, there was no shock, because in the first instance, there was no entitlement to anything. You can only get shocked if you're entitled to something. It was a privilege even to be on that short list, and even a greater privilege to have been a runners-up. It is also true, Chairman, that I did a press conference 2 days later after that process, and I said 2 things, namely that I'll take a break from elective politics, which I did, and 2, that I will not be available for any appointive office during my break. That last bit, I have since reviewed that position after persuasion by my party. My party persuaded me, and in fact, if the honorable member cared to listen to that speech, I said, however, notwithstanding my personal decision, if my party wishes to engage me and requires me to reconsider my position, I'll be willing to listen. So that is what made me to change my mind. Otherwise, it is true what he has said, but there was no shock. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I have no problem submitting. That is the easiest thing. And therefore, my friend Rigathi Gachagua, who is now the Deputy President of Kenya, is my boss. And I have no problem whatsoever working with him and under him, together with President Uhuru Kenyatta, together with President William Ruto. Uhuru Kenyatta is the former President of Kenya. I also served under him very well until he threw me out for no reason. So I'll be more than happy to serve under President William Ruto, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, all my colleagues, all arms of government, and I'll be a humble servant of Kenya, the people of Kenya, and there is no shock, there is no nothing, there is nothing to discuss.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
The next batch of 4.
To the law firm of Gũthũrima Ndundu and Associates.
And the data was Kipchumba Murkomen.
And the 15 million, just to clarify further, was in favor of Singoei, Murkomen, and Sigei advocates. But this company was one which was dealing with the 2 companies, with the 2 law firms. The out-of-the-box solutions is the company which was at the center of the investigations. Thank you. Solutions is the company which was at the center of the investigations. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
I think it is.
No, sorry, Mr. Speaker.
So
if you
hold
just
on, Professor.
1 second, because I think if you allow me,
yes,
that clarification by the Honorable Pio and I is extremely important. I have said before this committee, Chairman, I had a relationship, a debtor-creditor relationship with the Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen. He paid me using a check. Where he got the money or who has paid him, I don't know. I have never known. I will never know. That should be what goes on record.
What is on record is that the Honorable Pio and I has recanted the 15 million payment, and he has
without saying so.
And he has made it clear that it was a payment to a firm that has nothing to do with you. Yes, isn't that so, Pio?
Actually, that's the position. That's the position. Yes.
Let the chips rest where they fell.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr.
Shuria,
Speaker.
Naisula, and Gikaria.
Thank you very much, Mr.
One
Speaker.
question each.
Okay. And Chair, Professor Gũthũrima Ndundu, you have very well said that you're going to be a very humble but very firm CS if approved, which I appreciate. I also want to take the line that my boss here has said, that the former ministers have been very powerful. But I want you to choose to be a helpful minister, not really a powerful minister, and a facilitative, not a frustrative like we have had before. But within that context, please give us what is your vision for this Minister of Interior and National Administration, and what is your strategy? What do you want to achieve for the betterment of this country? On that line, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the nominee. The chiefs in this country have been facilitated by wazee wa vijiji and wazee wa nyumba kumi, and they have been effective because of this lot. But the previous administration refused to recognize the wazee wa vijiji and wazee wa nyumba kumi in law, and refused to remunerate them. And they live as paupers, but they're very helpful within the mainstream administration. What is your vision? Are you going to get them paid, recognized, or are you going to refuse to do so like your predecessor did? I brought a bill to Parliament to try to pay them, but your predecessor refused. Are you going to pay wazee wa vijiji? Are you going to recognize them in law so that they can continue to do the good job that they are doing? I thank you.
Shuria.
Thank you, Chair. Bwana nominee, there's questions which have been asked about the long and tedious procedure of vetting persons from border communities when they seek identification and travel documents. How do you plan to facilitate access by all Kenyans to these crucial documents that are a constitutional right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should emulate that batch. Naisola, follow suit with one question.
Thank you, Chair, but I'll request for your indulgence because what I'm about to ask is something that I know many of us share in this committee. And I constantly get the feeling that office holders responsible with matters security don't really understand or even are willing to comprehend the pain and losses caused by insecurity in the north. Cattle rustling is seen as a tradition and a people's backward culture. Kindly allow me to put this into context, and actually I pray for God's strength as I present this. Just yesterday, when I was undertaking this very important national duty, I received a text that criminals from my neighboring constituency, that is Tiati, ambushed herders, injured one person, and drove away with cattle. As if that was not enough, the criminals continue to be bolder by the day. This morning, they attacked again. As we speak, they have killed one person. 2 people are missing, one who is actually my staff, and they've stolen goods. On a normal day as a leader, I would have dropped everything, including this assignment, and rushed to my constituency to condole, bury, and have local security meetings. Then back to Nairobi, go to OP, we get a chopper, we go for security meetings, and we come back to Nairobi. Calm is restored, then reiteration attacks, most likely from my community, will take place, and the cycle continues. And this is the daily life of a typical pastoralist living along the border of another pastoralist county. The only time as a country we behave shocked or surprised is when we lose our security personnel, and only when we lose more than 2 or 3 lives. When will one life be too many to lose in the northern parts of this country? It should never be lost to us that at one point we lost over 42 police officers, and the only thing we have to show in Baragoi is a monument with the names of these fallen heroes. As a leader, I don't run away from my responsibility and have been consistent and diligent. But, nominee, I am tired. I am honestly tired. And Kenyans are tired. What do you intend to do differently from your predecessors, away from the usual rhetoric and threats? Perhaps you need to come and live in Kurkur, Pora, Longewan, Losuk, incognito for only 1 week. Come and stay there. What strategy or are your thoughts do you have to end this menace once and for all, so that as a leader I can execute my other national duties and not concern myself only on matters security? Thank you.
Thank you. Gikaria, Professor, I've allowed that emotional discourse because of the peculiar circumstances of the member. Gikaria.
Thank you, Chair.
One question.
Pongezi Kindiki.
Owen Bayer, switch off your microphone, please.
The question that I have, Honorable Kindiki, is that Kenya Kwanza Manifesto acknowledges that ensuring safe, secure, and fair environment through democratic policing, which contributes to development. What measures will you put in place to revive community policing initiative in urban areas and restore the public trust in the National Police Service? And I'm saying this because at the same time, maybe you can give us what constitutes a criminal gang that is supposed to be, to be banned, like these criminal gangs. In my place now, there is a gang called Confirm, and it is really bringing a lot of insecurity issues within the. So, what would be required for that group to be, not to be confirmed, to be, declared illegal, such that we can restore peace and order in Nakuru at large? Thank you.
Professor, those are 4. You can respond.
Thank you, Chair. On the first one, I promise to the nation and to the House, to this committee, that I will do what the Honorable Bayer has recommended, which is to be a helpful and facilitative minister on this very sensitive docket. My vision is to transform the national government administrative structure, NGAO, from a structure which has the amenability for misuse by politicians and leaders, to increasingly allow this very useful structure to concentrate on its mandate, which is to sensitize the public on government programs, mobilize the public on important national issues, and actually be agents, the agents of government for service delivery and citizen empowerment. That is the vision I have for this cadre. It can be done. It will be done. I also envisage a difficult project of trying to improve the relationship between our police service and citizens, because there has been over the years broken relationship and trust deficit between the police and the public. And some of the reasons for that trust deficit, some of the reasons are actually beyond the control of the police officers themselves. The poor terms and conditions, the lack of facilitation at the service delivery points. For example, you have over 600 police stations without a penny in terms of AIE. You want that OCS to arrest a suspect. It is up to that OCS to feed the suspect and take them to court. You want a DCI officer to record a statement. They do not have money even to buy a notepad or a pen. So some of the things we blame the police officers for are actually caused by lack of a working environment that is suitable for delivery of services. So I intend also, in line with the Kenya Kwanza bottom-up model, of delivery of services to use the police station as the service delivery point and work from there upwards, as opposed to relying only on the top commanders in terms of trying to understand the working environment in which our police officers work. With regard to Nyumba Kumi, I am a firm believer that this is a very critical organ within our security architecture. The kind of requests that have been presented by this cadre are very modest, actually, including 500 shillings for 2 meetings a week. That's 1,000 shillings a week. It can even be 2 meetings a month. And using the budget that is already available, we can cut down on non-core expenditure and make sure we deploy some of the resources to be able to appreciate this very critical cadre, which is at the bottom of the pyramid of our security architecture. With regard to community policing, Honorable Gikaria, I agree that there are a number of organized gangs in many of the urban centers in our country, with some form of permanence, organization, and command structure. And therefore, perhaps those are details we need to share so that we can, if there is a consistency, and these elements exist in the people committing those crimes in Nakuru, we can be able to support you and the people of Nakuru to make sure that we get rid of these people. With regard to the last issue on cattle rustling, I agree with the Honorable Naisula. The Honorable Naisula speaks on behalf of about 67% of Kenya's territory, the Kenya of the North. The Kenya of the North includes the North Rift, Northeastern, parts of Tana River, and some parts of the coastal strip fall in that category. A territory that is largely facing very serious insecurity. And allow me just to address the issue of banditry in the North Rift. I have been instructed, subject to this approval process, to make sure that we deal with banditry once and for all in the North Rift. Therefore, what am I going to do? I'll not be sharing operational issues here, but one of the challenges we have is the lack of operational capability for our officers who are serving in those areas. I have requested for facilitation so that we are able to improve the existing capabilities both for air and land mobility, but also for protection of officers to ensure that they keep the peace there and deal with that issue. We will also have to invoke the provisions of the Constitution and the National Police Service Act to ensure that we actually energize the community policing program to make sure that we don't just rely on soldiers, on officers who are just posted there and they do not even understand this terrain, so that the community helps the officers to be able to track the criminals. And in the meantime, as we venture into that collaborative community policing initiative, in the meantime, you allow us to do what the law says should happen to criminals. And I would not want to say further than that for now, except that I am instructed to ensure that the banditry problem is resolved once and for all. I assure Kenyans, and I assure this committee, that I will make whatever sacrifices that are required to be made. I will stay focused until this problem is over. Even if it means Honorable Naisula coming to live in the North Rift. Not for a week, not for a month. We will stay there as long as it is necessary. Because, Honorable Speaker, when criminals, bandits, castle rustlers, terrorists, when they don't fear government, as Honorable Naisula has said, that culture that they raid today, they raid tomorrow, they kill police officers, they kill civilians, when that culture permits, then the legitimacy of the state is at stake. So we'll do whatever it takes. As soon as I take office, the number one assignment is to ensure we set free this country from criminals, from bandits, terrorists, and cattle rustlers, not through press conferences. We will speak less because security does not require speaking. But I also want to assure the nation, the Honorable Chairman, we will follow the law. We will respect the Constitution. We will respect all the international human rights and humanitarian treaties that are part of the law of Kenya. But we will still do the job, because in some of the most secure countries, ruthlessness with criminals is matched with the respect for human rights. So law-abiding citizens don't have anything to fear. There will be no extrajudicial killings. There will be no abuse of human rights. But we will do to criminals what needs to be done for them under both national and international law.
The next batch of Shuria's question on issuance of travel documents. I think it says you didn't answer that.
Yes, I think the Honorable Shuria, the issue of, particularly the issue of vetting in northern Kenya, is not a requirement of the law, it's an administrative measure. In light of the need to respect fundamental rights and freedoms and make sure that there is no discrimination, we will increasingly review the procedures for vetting to make them human rights friendly and friendly to the citizens of Kenya. But in the long term, Honorable Chairman, the long-term solution for that vetting problem, which is a bit uncomfortable, I must say, but is necessary, is when the country will adopt a unique identifier number at birth. An attempt was made under the Vision 2030, under the IPRS project, which was abandoned, and then the Huduma bill came and took over some of that effort and brought confusion. Some of the matters are in court. But the moment you are able to have a unique identifier number at birth, then you will not need to be vetted by anybody, because government will have the record of every child, every person born in Kenya. So the idea of vetting will go in the long term. But in the short term, please, we must secure our borders, and there are many ethnic consanguinities and relationships, especially in the north, with other ethnicities in neighboring countries. So it's not supposed to be a punishment on Kenyans. It's just meant to ensure that at least we secure our borders and make sure that we protect the Kenyan population. We will ease that and make it human rights friendly. Eventually, that has to go when that project on an integrated population registration system is complete.
Posing Emase Raso Koech.
I thank you, Honorable Chair, for giving me this golden opportunity.
Everybody will ask a question, so don't worry.
For giving me, Mr. Chair, this golden opportunity. And Professor Kindiki, the nominee, if this committee sees it fit to approve you, and the House definitely then agrees with the committee, if that happens, you are coming at a very interesting time. Very interesting time, Professor Kindiki, when this country is facing myriads of threats in terms of insecurity. But allow me to ask you, Professor Kindiki, what new thing will Kenyans be expecting from you, and particularly from the area you say 67% of the place, North Rift, and specifically where I come from? I can feel Honorable Lesuda. But let me ask you, Honorable Professor, the government has been using this approach called oppression, which now I have, from my own study, I have renamed it extrajudicial killing. And I'm talking from a community, Honorable Professor and Honorable Chair, that has suffered this extrajudicial killing. But they name it oppression so that it looks good. It looks accepted to be meted on a community like Pokot. Honorable Chair, you can remember. The worst one was in 1984, where almost 25% of Pokot were exterminated through that operation. Honorable Chair, through the same strategy, operation. The worst, and the latest was 2015, 2016, when people were massacred, abducted, never seen, Professor Kindiki, up to today. Never seen. No question asked. And even the worst, Honorable Chair, it's going on now in Tiati. People are missing. People are getting lost in the name of operation. Because that kind of community, Professor, has been profiled for many years. And therefore, they have become like the bunching back, or it is true to do an operation in West Pokot. So you wake up, and in fact, that might be your measure, performance contract. If the first thing, you hit. So Professor Kindiki, these are people of Kenya. They have suffered. What new thing will you bring, Honorable Kindiki? Finally, Chair.
More than your bite.
Finally, Chair.
Yes.
The normal norm in Kenya is, if you want to become a police in recruitment, you must pay money to be recruited. That is the critical and biggest issue, Honorable Chair, if you allow me, that Professor Kindiki, knowing his background, must come and deal with it, Honorable Chair, so that people can feel they can be recruited fairly without selling land. I thank you, Chair.
Emase?
Thank you, Chair. My concern to the nominee is on addiction and alcohol abuse. Addiction and alcohol abuse is on the rise, and it is a crisis. So my question is, what are you going to do to address this menace? The issue of narcotic drugs. How are you going to manage to tackle the issue of trafficking of drugs? And Chair, just allow me to echo the issue on IDs, because I come from a border constituency, that is Teso South. If you're going to Uganda, members will pass through my constituency. I welcome you. And our men have married from Uganda, from the diaspora. So I have a situation where we have grandmothers. These ladies were married 20 years ago, 50. Up to today, they're being treated as foreigners. They cannot own property. They cannot get IDs. This process is so tedious, it is long, and I will be following, assuming we approve you. I think that's an area I'll be following up on you to see whether it can be improved so that these women can be recognized. So that they can own IDs and they can own property and they can enjoy all other services as Kenyans. Thank you.
Russell.
Thank you very much, Chair. Professor, if the House approves your nomination, you'll be the first lawyer who will be sitting in Interior. That in itself will be a history. In Kenya, there are two laws that are operating. One law is in the 67% that you talked about, and the other law operates in the remainder of the country. What the honorable members from the pastoralist communities have raised are far-reaching. It is about the exclusion of those communities who live in ASAL areas, whether they are ID cards, whether they are cattle rustling, whether they are killings, whether they are inappropriate application of the law. So my question to you, because interior is the anchor around which Kenya moves, but more and more we see that the problem is not even in Pokot, it's not in Marsabit, Isiolo or Garissa. The problem is in the office, which fortunately you might occupy. How do you intend to go about in making Kenyans feel that they are in a unitary state and they enjoy equal opportunity as Kenyans? Thank you, Chair.
Professor, mine will be on professionalization of our security agencies and provincial administration. I did go with you to many parts of this country where your predecessor will use the provincial administration to scatter our rallies, use the chiefs to execute political errands, thus making the provincial administration untidy. The Constitution 2010 has a place for the provincial administration and the politicians. What will you do different from your predecessor?
Thank you. Professor, those are 4.
Thank you. Let me start with the last one. The President has already pronounced publicly that it is not the intention of this administration to use national government administration officers or police officers to do politics. Taking cue from that pronouncement, which is as it should anyway, we, and I can say I, subject to the approval by this House, will refrain from interfering in any way whatsoever with the decision-making independence and operational independence of the police, but at the same time, I'll refrain from giving any instructions to the national government administration officers to facilitate the politics of any political party, including Kenya Kwanza, because that is against the Public Officer Ethics Act. It is also against the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act. It is unethical for a member of the National Government Administration Office to support the activities or the political activities of a political party, and to use the instruments that are supposed to be used to protect citizens and their property to propagate the political activities of any political party. With regard to the issue of cattle rustling again, which has been repeated by the Honorable Kosing, one, there is need for enhanced capability. You remember in 1996, this country lost a district commissioner, Mr. James Nyandoro, when the helicopter he was flying, as he was trying to track cattle which had been stolen in Turkana, was shot down by bandits. When I talk about capability, I mean the need to modernize the armed personnel carriers, both land and air carriers, because the kind of carriers that require to get criminals out of the caves and gorges are the type that cannot fall under the fire of these bandits. I know a case has been made that violence is not an option, and I agree. But it's one of the options. It's one of the options. It's not the only option, but it's one of the options. Because what language are you going, what discussion are you going with a criminal who has stolen 100 cows from an innocent person and is hiding in a gorge? What is he doing in a gorge in the first place? So you flatten the gorge to start with. Then now you